90.1 पर और साथ ही साथ सुन रहे हैं रेडियो मनपसंद ऐप पर। मैं हूं आपके साथ किशोर नंगरानी। आज के कार्यक्रम में हम एक ऐसे विषय पर बातचीत करने वाले हैं जो हमारी इंडियन कम्युनिटी में जिस विषय पर अधिक बातचीत नहीं होती या होती भी है तो बड़े हश-हश तरीके से होती है। यह विषय है LGBTI कम्युनिटी के बारे में, यानी लेस्बियन, गे, बाइसेक्सुअल, ट्रांसजेंडर, इंटरसेक्स एंड क्यूअर कम्युनिटी के बारे में। यह एक ऐसी कम्युनिटी है जिसे दुनिया भर में सदियों से भेदभाव, प्रताड़ना और अत्याचारों का शिकार होना पड़ा। हाल ही के वर्षों में ये स्थिति थोड़ी सी बदल रही है और LGBTI कम्युनिटी को स्वीकार किया जा रहा है, उनको सही स्थान दिया जा रहा है समाज में। यह विश्वास नहीं होता है कि अभी 25 वर्षों तक पहले तक यहाँ ऑस्ट्रेलिया में होमोसेक्सुअलिटी इलीगल थी और जहाँ तक इंडिया का सवाल है वहाँ 2018 में जाकर कहीं होमोसेक्सुअलिटी को जो है लीगल माना गया। गे वेडिंग्स, सेम सेक्स मैरिज आपने सुना है, आपको मालूम ही है कि 2017 में जाकर यहाँ पर लीगल हुई। तो ये हालत बदल रही है, लेकिन धीरे धीरे बदल रही है और अभी भी एक लंबी जर्नी है। आज इस विषय पर बातचीत करने के लिए हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं कुणाल मीरचंदानी। कुणाल मीरचंदानी जो यहाँ पर त्रिकोण ऑस्ट्रेलिया ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है उसके डायरेक्टर हैं। त्रिकोण ऑस्ट्रेलिया एक ऐसा ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है जो कि साउथ एशियन ओरिजिन के LGBTI कम्युनिटी को सपोर्ट करता है, एम्पावर करता है। कुणाल जी, आपका हमारे प्रोग्राम में स्वागत है।
Thank you, Kishore ji. Great to be here.
So in 2023, Mardi Gras was back in the Oxford Street. तो फिर से वही अपना धूम धड़ाके के साथ ये परेड हुई। वहाँ पर देखकर काफी आनंद आया कि वो कलरफुल कॉस्ट्यूम्स, फ्लोट्स और डांस और म्यूजिक भी था। और इस वर्ष तो एक खास बात ये भी थी कि प्राइम मिनिस्टर एंथनी अल्बनीजी भी वहाँ पर थे, उन्होंने भी परेड में हिस्सा लिया। आप भी इसमें हिस्सा लेते हैं, पार्टिसिपेट करते हैं, आपका एक्सपीरियंस कैसा रहा?
हाँ भाई, बिल्कुल बढ़िया। Actually, to be honest, we have been marching within Astracon, the South Asian community, for the last 12 consecutive years. So even during COVID, when there were lockdowns, they had moved the parade out of Oxford Street and we were doing it at the Sydney Cricket Ground. And even then we participated every year because we believed in the importance of like representation and visibility, particularly for our community, because we're a minority within a minority. But this year was amazing. There were, thousands, tens of thousands of attendees. We had about 70 participants in our parade. A lot of them were members of our community, but we also had a lot of allies, friends and supporters of gay and lesbian Indians and South Asians who also joined the parade. Obviously, it was also Sydney World Pride. So it was a big event, and so we had a really good time. It was amazing, and I think everyone had, a positive experience afterwards.
तो पहले, इससे पहले कि और बातचीत करें, मार्डी ग्रा होता क्या है, इसका मतलब क्या है, कब इसकी हिस्ट्री क्या है एंड इसकी इम्पोर्टेंस क्या है?
Yeah, so Mardi Gras, particularly here in Sydney, in Australia, it started off as a purely protest march. So what happened 1978 May, and this is, it's actually, when you think about it, not that long ago. So homosexuality was illegal. Obviously, same-sex marriage was illegal. We had the community was looked down upon by large chunks of the wider mainstream community. On Oxford Street, there was an impromptu protest march that happened, and this was to mark the anniversary of the Stonewall riots in New York. So New York made club tha Stonewall, and in the like 2 or 3 years prior to the 78 march, they had a big police brutality, and so a lot of people got locked up, and so that made world headlines. During 1978, there was a big group that ended up marching down Oxford Street, and even though they had a permit, they got a permit from the local council and the government to organize that march to protest against, higher incarceration rates for gay people, particularly, but also lack of support for the community. What ended up happening was that New South Wales police at the time sent out a bunch of its people, and I think altogether there were like about 50, I think between 50 and 100 people who got locked up that night. All of them were released, and eventually all their charges were dropped. But then very soon after that, and this was practice at the time, the Sydney Morning Herald actually published the names of all the people who were arrested. A lot of them then got outed. Obviously, a lot of them, this was a different time, a lot of them lost their jobs as a result of their names being published. So it was a really, really difficult time to be gay. But what stood out, I think what we remember those people for today is for their bravery, because, despite the opposition, despite the setbacks, they could have easily chosen to stay at home. They went out and they marched to show that, that we exist as a community. Today, obviously, Mardi Gras is miles away from that march. Today, we have corporate sponsorships. Allianz, ANZ has a float. Qantas has a float. There's millions of dollars that gets pumped into it by the government. It generates a lot of income as well, but it's more about celebration. There's still elements of protest because there's still a long way to go for some sections of the community, particularly transgender people who still are fighting for their rights, but in a lot of ways it's now become a celebration march.
Okay. जो है पहली बार वर्ल्ड प्राइड भी यहाँ पर सिडनी में हुआ और पहली बार सदर्न हेमिस्फीयर में ये वर्ल्ड प्राइड मनाया गया। वर्ल्ड प्राइड के बारे में बताइए और किस तरह से मार्डी ग्रा से डिफरेंट है।
So World Pride, essentially, it's a festival which celebrates LGBT community, but also is a platform to kind of raise awareness of the issues that still plague the community. And because it's World Pride, it's not just limited to like one region. It is looking at like lots of people of color as well. For example, आपने कहा जैसे earlier कि इंडिया में homosexuality just recently decriminalized हुआ था, लेकिन same sex marriage तो दूर की बात है. तो there's a lot of different countries which have different rules and restrictions. If you go to the Middle East, they're very restrictive as to whether you can come out or not. Some of them even get punished with death, for example, when they are revealed to be gay or lesbian. So I think the World Pride is just a way for all of us to collectively get together and say, okay, where are we at? How much work is there left?
तो त्रिकोण ऑस्ट्रेलिया, आपने जैसे पहले बताया ब्रीफली कि इसमें मार्डी ग्रा में हमेशा भाग लेता रहा है और इस साल भी काफी जबरदस्त तरीके से भाग लिया, पार्टिसिपेट किया इसमें। हमारे कैनबरा ढोलीज भी थे और संड्रेला म्यूजिकल भी हुआ, बार बॉम्बे। जरा उन फेस्टिविटीज के बारे में बताइए, किस तरह से रहा ये?
बिल्कुल बढ़िया. As in, it was 2 weeks of festivities, but it was almost a whole year of planning, organizing, putting together a whole network of people to work on all these events. So like you mentioned, we had the Mardi Gras parade where we had Canberra representation. So Priya from Canberra Dholis joined us and she led the charge. What we were showing was essentially kind of like a barat. So so on the float we had two sets of couples. We had two like a same-sex female couple and a same-sex male couple, and we were trying to show that okay, yes, they are celebrating their love and their wedding with a whole contingent of marchers behind them. So it went really well. But also we had a stage show, Cinderella, which is a story that was completely written, directed, acted by the community, and it's all volunteers who are doing it because they want to share their story. So that also was very well received. We had only 4 nights. Each night was sold out. There were 870 people who came and watched it over those 4 nights. But yeah, it was essentially a story of Cinderella, but told through the queer lens, through where instead it tells a story of a gay relationship and how it can thrive in times of difficulty. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. But other than those two, we also had a stall during Fair Day, which is kind of like a mela. So we wanted to make sure that if people were coming a lot of people from overseas were coming, then we wanted to let them know that yes, we exist as a community group. And on top of that, we also then had a dance party, a Bollywood dance party called Bar Bombay, which we so yeah, busy time, but went very well.
तो आपने तो पूरा इंडियन सीन वहां पर क्रिएट कर दिया। इंडियन बारात भी आई, साथ ही साथ इंडियन मेला भी लगा और इंडियन
हाँ
बॉलीवुड डांस
भाई,
पार्टी हो रही है।
कल्चर हमारा इतना कलरफुल है, वी हैव टू शो इट ऑफ।
जी। और ये जो है आपने बताया कि त्रिकोण ने ऑर्गेनाइज किया, और इस तरह के इवेंट्स ऑर्गेनाइज करना कोई आसान काम नहीं है। जैसे कि आप कह रहे हैं, साल भर का एफर्ट्स लगे और काफी लोगों की मेहनत है इसके पीछे। जानना चाहूंगा त्रिकोण के बारे में। त्रिकोण ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की क्या हिस्ट्री रही है और क्या रोल प्ले करता है ये अपनी साउथ एशियन कम्युनिटी को सपोर्ट और एम्पावर करने के लिए।
Yeah. So Trikone actually started about 15, close to 15 years ago now. It started I wasn't necessarily directly involved at the beginning. I was volunteering, but there was a group of people who got together and said, "Haan bhai ki, what shall we do? We are all very proud of our culture." All of them were recent migrants from mostly from India. And so they thought, how can we still, be part of the gay and lesbian community, but still hold on to our culture, meet other people like us. So it started off very small. Over the years, it has grown year on year. Aaj hamari membership, we have got over 1,000 people all over Australia who have joined or become members of Trikone and have identified themselves as whether they're gay or lesbian or transgender. From the South Asian community. So yeah, it's a growing community, and very, very passionate about who we are. So it didn't originally start in Sydney. There's actually Trikones all over the world, mainly in the US. So for example, there's a Trikone in San Francisco, there's a Trikone in Chicago. And they're all kind of run like their own individual chapters. जैसे तो हमारी Sydney chapter is the base of Trikone Australia.
Right, okay. अब जरा इन विषयों के बारे में बात करते हैं। जो एलजीबीटीआई कम्युनिटी, जहां तक अपनी इंडियन कम्युनिटी है, हमें सभी आपने पहले भी बताया कि हमारी कम्युनिटी थोड़ी सी कंजर्वेटिव है। और जब इस विषय पर बातचीत करते हैं एलजीबीटीआई के बारे में, उसके अपने एक तरह के अलग चैलेंजेस हैं। फैमिली प्रेशर्स हैं, फ्रेंड्स के प्रेशर्स हैं, कम्युनिटी के प्रेशर्स हैं। किस तरह के चैलेंजेस, तो स्टार्ट विद अपने फैमिली के प्रेशर से ही शुरुआत करते हैं। किस तरह के जनरली एक्सेप्टेड नहीं होता है, किस तरह से वो चैलेंजेस होते हैं?
I think challenges तो every family के unique होते हैं. It depends on your upbringing, where you are, and even things like, the socio-economic status of your family, for example. And everyone's experience is unique. So I don't want to generalize it for everyone. But having said that, it is difficult and it's different to say people from an Anglo background or people from other backgrounds. And that's why we created this, because, there's no one size fits all as far as support goes. We can speak to people who are of a similar background to us because we know, things like, expectations from parents, intergenerational trauma, or, and Indian parents are particularly can be, a little bit tight-lipped when it comes to showing affection, for example, or letting their kids know that it's okay, I'm here for you. It's all about setting expectations. This is your life plan charted in front of you. You've reached this age, right? Time to get married. So, our experiences are all different. My own also, I did not come out to my parents until I was in my mid-20s. I just turned 40. So about 15 years ago. But until then, I was trying to, I was holding back. I didn't want them to know because I was ashamed of it. I thought that maybe they will, reject me, or they will be, worst case, they will be disappointed, because I did not want to disappoint them. So इसीलिए मैं थोड़ा, I was afraid, I was hesitant to come out. But luckily, my parents took it well, and they're quite supportive of me, my lifestyle, my partner. So my experience is one experience, but I also know that there are other people whose parents have stopped talking to them entirely, who have refused talking to them. I think it will take time. It has gotten better. But what we believe is that what will make it better is if there's more visibility. That's why we push for, getting into mainstream media, and thanks to you, and giving us a platform here through your radio channel, so that, so that people can see that, we're a diverse group there, and, we can't be generalized, and we don't really want anything other than to be ourselves.
आपने सही बात कही। जहां तक हमारी कम्युनिटी का सवाल है, आप तो गे और लेस्बियन की तो बात छोड़िए, अपने बॉयफ्रेंड और गर्लफ्रेंड की बात करते हुए भी डर लगता है अपने पेरेंट्स के साथ। तो काफी कुछ करना पड़ता है इस मामले में। आपने अपना एक्सपीरियंस भी शेयर किया, और आप बात कर रहे थे सिंड्रेला के डायरेक्टर जो हैं, क्या नाम है उनका?
बालीपड़ा।
उनके बारे में थोड़ा सा बताइए।
So he also, as a director of Cinderella, he has been in the community for quite a few years now. But from his point of view, coming out was also a bit of a challenge, because his father and his family are pretty well known. They're pretty well established in the community. And I think over the years, what started off as a, do not talk to me about you being gay, or let's not even get there. Recently, there was an article that we had on Indian Link magazine about the play Cinderella, and there was a good profile about Bali. And then his father and him, his father had a chat and said, you know what, that was a really good story. So this is something that you've gone from being ashamed of your son to almost being proud of your son. And so I think seeing that representation in mainstream media just validates our experience, particularly to our parents.
तो आपने जैसे कहा कि ये जर्नी अपने आप में डिफिकल्ट है, लेकिन अगर इसको नॉर्मलाइज करते रहें, जिसके बारे में आज जितनी ज्यादा बातचीत किए जाए, उतने ही लोग जो हैं इसको एक्सेप्ट भी करेंगे। इस मामले में ये भी पूछना चाहूंगा कि लड़कों के लिए हमारे कम्युनिटी में शायद लड़कों के लिए इट्स लॉट इजियर अगर दे डिसाइड टू कम आउट। आई वुडंट से लॉट इजियर, बट लेस डिफिकल्ट। और लड़कियां अगर हो तो उनके लिए तो और ज्यादा मुश्किल होता होगा। आप ऐसा महसूस करते हैं क्या?
I think so. I think we have got people who have been forced into marriages, for example, and some of them have gone into arrangements. आपने सुना होगा, I think last year एक movie आई थी बधाई दो, which is about a lavender marriage, which is where a gay guy and a lesbian woman decide to get married so that they can make their parents happy, but still continue to live their own lives. And I suppose that is one way to do it, but having said that, it must be exhausting having to constantly put a front to your parents and your family every day in and day out. So I can't imagine how difficult it must be for them. But yes, some people decide to repress their sexuality and just go along with what society expects from them. And to be honest, I couldn't think of a sadder thing. If you're a parent and if you love your kid, how can you wake up one morning and say, I want my kid not to live his or her life as at their fullest? How can you be happy knowing that your kid is not happy? So that, to me, I do not understand. Just so that you can fit the example of what a model family should look like, just so that Janki down the street does not talk about you.
That's right. तो वो भी एक इम्पोर्टेंट फैक्टर है। जैसे कि आपने कहा कि जहां तक फैमिली का सवाल है, इंस्टिंक्ट तो होती है कि अपना बच्चा जैसा भी है, अपना ही बच्चा है, उसको प्यार करते रहना है। लेकिन ये दिमाग में ये रहता है कि कम्युनिटी एट लार्ज, जो हमारे हमेशा फीलिंग रहती है, लोग क्या कहेंगे, वो ज्यादा प्रेशर डालता है, लगता है।
हाँ, या क्योंकि हमारी तो कम्युनिटी एंड कल्चर ही ऐसी है कि लोग क्या कहेंगे, जैसे आपने कहा, तो वो उसमें लोगों की ओपिनियन में हम ज्यादा इम्पोर्टेंस देते हैं एज अपोज टू आवर ओन हैप्पीनेस और आवर फैमिलीज हैप्पीनेस। तो सैक्रिफाइस इज व्हाट वी एंजॉय डूइंग, आई थिंक।
त्रिकोण का जैसे कि अभी आपने पहले भी कहा कि वी आर ऑलरेडी अ माइनॉरिटी, एंड देन विद इन दैट LGBTI community is also minority. उसके अपने अलग चैलेंजेस होते होंगे कि अगर आप मान लीजिए कि डेटिंग करना चाहते हैं अपनी ही कम्युनिटी, अपने ही कल्चर के लोगों से, उसका वेरी लिमिटेड पूल है, इस तरह
हाँ,
की समस्याएं, प्रॉब्लम्स होती होंगी।
आई थिंक द थिंग इज, आई पर्सनली थिंक कि हम तो सब एक लैडर में हैं, एंड हम एक एक जगह है एक लैडर में, और देयर आर पीपल हु आर अबव अस एंड देयर आर पीपल हु आर बिलो अस, एंड our instinct is to discriminate against the people who are below us because we are in a higher position. जैसे आपने कहा कि it's easier for men than it is for women. So because of our patriarchal society, men are higher on the ladder than the women, and so that's how our society is kind of structured. So even in the gay community, I'm not saying that ladder does not exist. Even there is a spectrum. So, for example, someone who is, quote unquote white or from an Anglo background might think or perceive themselves as being superior to another gay person who is, brown or black or of color. So there is discrimination. I'm not going to lie. There is discrimination on dating apps. You can open and say, "Oh, sorry, I don't want to date Indians." So that is something that we have to combat every day. But also I think acceptance is also growing. I think we are once again, it's about getting out there. आपने जैसे देखा होगा recently Oscars था, I think the other day, and it was the first time that actually we had an Indian winner, that RRR composer went up on stage for Natu Natu. And until then, most people had never even heard of a Bollywood movie, a lot of, or hadn't seen it on Oscar stage, but now they know, so I think when you have that visibility, that's when understanding comes. Most of the time we're afraid of something that we do not know or we have never met. People who are homophobic have probably never met a gay person in their life.
और एक बार मिल लेते हैं, उसके बाद लगता है तो नॉर्मल है, इसमें कोई फर्क नहीं है। और
हमारी इमेजिनेशन ऐसी है कि हम सोचते हैं कि यार बड़ी एक्सट्रीम, ये पेडोफाइल होगा, तो आई थिंक वी हैव टू बी केयरफुल अबाउट आवर ओन बायसेस,
प्रीकंसीव्ड नोशंस। और अब आपका त्रिकोण जो है, जैसा कि आपने कहा कि काफी काम कर रहा है इसमें, किस तरह से वो लोग त्रिकोण ऑर्गेनाइजेशन सपोर्ट कर रहा है एलजीबीटीआई जो साउथ एशियन डिसेंट के हैं उन लोगों को?
हाँ, तो हमारी obviously membership base is wide, but also very varied. Like, we've got different types. So our level of support depends on who we're talking to. Generally, what we find ki, there are two types of Indians or South Asians that we have among our members. There's number one, those who moved here as either a student or a young professional, and their parents, most of their parents or their family are still back home in India or in other parts of South Asia. And then there's the second type, which is, those Indian children who are born here. So their parents were the ones who migrated. What we found is that generally the first group, the people who moved here themselves, tend to be a little bit more out, and themselves. Whereas the children of migrant parents tend to be a little bit more closeted or a little bit more careful about revealing their sexuality to their families or to their workplaces. I think the difference is that you still have to go back home to these parents and you're not sure how they will react. Even though you've got an Australian accent, you've lived here all your life, for some reason you're kind of caught at the crossroads between, am I Australian, am I Indian? And and there's a big cultural expectation. So the way we speak and communicate and get volunteers and interact with these communities depends on who we're talking to. But what we want is, moving forward, try to reach out to more of the second group. So the people who feel a little bit alienated. Sometimes they don't even want to approach us because they don't even consider themselves Indians necessarily. So why should they need an Indian support group, but it's just a matter of speaking or communicating in that way.
That's a quite interesting point जो आपने बताया। अब तो एक और तो त्रिकोण जो है अब कोशिश कर रहा है, दूसरी ओर जैसे कि हमने बातचीत करी, अब यहाँ ढेर सारे इंडियन कम्युनिटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं और इंडियन कम्युनिटी इन जनरल का जो है व्यूज किस तरह से चेंज हो, और इंडियन कम्युनिटी क्या कर सकती है और ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस क्या कर सकते हैं एलजीबीटीआई कम्युनिटी को सपोर्ट करने के लिए अपनी इंडियन कम्युनिटी के?
I think first of all, communities, there's different types of communities. There's lots of minorities. आपको तो पता होगा, India
हाँ.
itself, it's almost like it's not one country. It's like, 100 countries. There's a Gujarati group, there's a Bengali group, there's a,
हाँ.
Punjabi group. And so there's different communities anyway. I think the most important thing is just to be open-minded, just to be accepting, knowing कि हाँ भाई, the person who you do not understand, who belongs to a different group, they've got their own challenges like you, they've got their own lives like you know. And I think just being more aware and accepting of that could help us all live more harmoniously together. So that's, I guess, the first step. Number two is, if you know someone, or if someone in your family is struggling with her or his sexuality, or is going through a phase where they're thinking about whether or not the life that has been laid out for them is right for them, I think just being there to support them, because these people are your loved ones. You want to be there to support them and help them, live their best life. And I think we're all on different stages of that, if you have someone in your family like that. But what I would encourage is particularly if that's the situation, reach out to us, because we'll be able to either help connect you to the right support networks. We are trying to start a group which is going to be the parents of gay and lesbian Indians here in India, and it's a growing community actually. And we want them to be able to form a group where they can share their experiences, ask questions in a safe environment, and just meet other people, because the challenges of being a parent to a lesbian or gay child is its own challenge, and nobody else would really understand that. So it's going to be difficult for them too. So we want to be able to create a network to support them as well.
कुणाल जी, आपके साथ ये बातचीत करके बड़ा अच्छा लगा। और जैसा कि आपने कहा कि द मोर वी टॉक अबाउट दैट, द मोर नॉर्मल इट बिकम्स, क्योंकि आफ्टर ऑल लव इज लव। और हमें विश्वास है कि आप जो इस मामले में काम कर रहे हैं, दैट कंट्रीब्यूशन इज फैंटास्टिक, और इसी तरह से काम चलता रहे। और एक ऐसा टाइम आए जब हमको इस तरह की बात करने की जरूरत ही नहीं पड़े कि कौन गे है, कौन लेस्बियन है, कौन, ये तो कोई फर्क ही नहीं पड़ता। जिस तरह से हम आम लोग हैं उसी तरह से ही रहे। थैंक यू
बिल्कुल
वेरी मच
बिल्कुल
फॉर।
थैंक यू वेरी मच किशोर जी।
थैंक्स।